I think the thing that I'm always looking for is a way to not only tell my story, but tell the story that I see going on around me, and to find ways to express the emotion or the sensation that's inside of me in a way that sometimes I feel like words don't completely get across.
Welcome to the Holistic Life Navigation Podcast, where we explore life through the lens of somatics. I'm Luis Mujica, a somatic educator who teaches people how to find safety in themselves. Your turn to learn begins now. Hello, my friends. So today I have a special guest, Evan Glenn Adams. Most of you know him as the phantom behind the veil who takes care of all of this audio that you hear on the podcast. He does the sound healings in our course. He does them for our membership, and he does a lot of the sound effects and even the musical interludes on the podcast itself. Evan is an incredible musician. I met him in 2017. Is that right?
Sounds right.
2017. He was managing a health food store that I used to work at in this little town of Woodstock. And I gave you my record, and I didn't hear anything from you for a while, so I just thought you didn't like it, because a lot of people don't like my music. And then I forget how it happened that we started hanging out, but I got your record. That's what it was. You just like gave me yours because I gave you mine. So when I came to the store, you had given me one of your CDs. And it was so good. It transported me. It always transports me to the 90s, your music. It's like these like undiscovered 90s albums. And I just loved them. And then you and I started collaborating. You're an excellent drummer, amongst other things. And then we toured together, and then we just have been kind of supporting each other in our music back and forth. But I wanted to spend this episode highlighting your new record and just letting you tell our audience how you see music and how it affects you and how it heals you. And even though they know you as someone who does sound healing, this is like another branch of the music that you create. So let's actually begin with just saying Evan's band name is called Heavybird. So when we say Heavybird, that's what we're referring to. And this new record is called A Lit Candle in an Empty Room. So why don't you start by just taking us through like the creature of Heavybird? How did this get created?
Yeah, thank you. Um, Gosh, so I started Heavybird, I think it was about 2014. I had been playing music for a long time before that, but I wasn't actively in a band, and I still wanted to be making music because I feel like a lot of what we had bonded over, maybe not consciously even at first, was what a big impact music has really had on our lives, and especially the creation too. Like, I mean, I've
Mhm.
had such beautiful moments listening to other people's recordings or being in other people's live events, concerts and things. But I mean, specifically recordings too. I've had really like transcendent mystical experiences listening to other people's music, um, and creating my own too. I mean, that was something that I started doing in my early teens, and that really transformed my life in a way that I one had an outlet and a good way to spend time with other people. I loved the structure of, you know, you get together with friends or you're in the school band, and you have that commonality. And also just music as a way of processing emotions. And I had gone through a period where I was in a band and then I wasn't, and I had actually decided I was gonna sell all my instruments and just become a traveling poet.
Mm.
I tried that hat on for a while.
Wait, what did that
Um,
look like? What did that look like?
What did that look like? Gosh, I don't have the picture, but there's a picture of me with a long beard, and I'm sitting like on a street corner with a notebook, and I'm just kind of writing about what I see and the kind of
Mm.
situations I find myself in.
Hmm.
um, and I think in a lot of ways I was able to reincorporate that. But I think the thing that I'm always looking for is a way to not only tell my story, but tell the story that I see going on around me, and to find ways to express the emotion or the sensation that's inside of me in a way that sometimes I feel like words don't completely get across.
So right there, I want to just pause and let the listener listen to the opening track, Light the Candle. So I love this opening track. What I was curious about with it was, uh, I've seen you yell into a guitar before, and it, like, is that what you're doing in this one? Or
No,
is
I
that just the
actually
effects?
it's just the effects, yeah.
Okay.
No, this album specifically, well, so I had written this album entirely during the pandemic, and I actually had another album in line to come out that was this very, open, expansive, spiritual album that had all these parts of gratitude and all these very, like, big, um, very pleasant undertones, I think, and it felt really tone deaf to have that be the album that came out after everything that happened over the past few years. So I felt like I really wanted to make something that spoke more to what was happening, and I didn't have almost any of my instruments with me, so I did a lot more things, virtually in the computer than I had in the past,
Mhm.
and very piecemeal too. I was working a different job that I had a lot of long hours, and so I didn't have my instruments, but I still felt that need to create music and to communicate the thing that was inside me.
Mhm.
And yeah, I remember one night, I might have even recorded my voice on my computer microphone. And then I just had a sampler instrument that had these really beautiful string sounds. And I just kind of merged those together for that. It was
Mm.
very spur of the moment too. I kind of built things around that initial core because I felt like there was something really raw and real in that kind of voice that like kind of comes out. It sounds like almost like over a canyon or something.
Mhm.
I think I might have sung it in the cupped hands
That makes
or
sense.
something.
There's something so, like, intimate,
Mm,
yet highly expansive about that piece. Like, my feel my heart opening up as I listen to it. It's like a portal opens, which I love when opening tracks to albums are like portals, like almost a blessing or an invocation for what's to come, and it feels like an invocation. And it makes me wonder, like, you know, all of my work goes through my name, Luis Mojica. I've reconsidered this over and over and over again. So I have like a list of names I've been like wanting to bring out. But I'm wondering, like, what does it afford you to have a name that's not you, to have this like other character or creature? Like, how does your body
Mhm.
unfold things that maybe it wouldn't if it was your name?
Yeah, I love that. Um, I don't know. I feel like, especially when I started a lot of these things, I mean, I was not familiar with parts work, and I've done a lot of different music projects that have kind of landed in all different places, in different genres. And I really love the kind of parts work approach of like, this is the part of me that has this thing to say, and kind of running things through that lens. And I feel like that's often um, what I end up doing because even though I'm incorporating a lot of genres into what I'm doing here, I'm still very focused on trying to tell a certain kind of a story. And this album actually, I feel like, is the least narrative in terms of lyrically, but it
Hmm.
is more so musically. It almost verges more on instrumental compared to some of my other albums, which are very lyrically heavy.
It's also
And
highly cinematic. Like, I see so many
mm,
images moving when I hear it.
yeah, and a lot of what I wanted to do on this album too was kind of piece a lot of things together. Like it felt very piecemeal, and it felt like my experience and what I think a lot of people's experiences during the past few years were very disjointed and
Mm.
unsure, and you don't know where things are going next. And trying to kind of bring that into the music too, of how quickly things are changing and our reaction to it, even.
I think what I gained from listening to it is it feels like you're in between wake and sleep, like
Mm,
even within one song, which I really like. I think there's this term called straight through composing. I think that's what it's called. It's the term that's applied to, Joanna Newsom, and
mm,
ways that I have written and ways that you write this album, where it's not about repetition, it's not about
okay.
hypnotizing, it's about, like, following a feeling until it's over, and it has all these different transformative experiences in it. And more than anything I've heard you write before, I haven't heard you really do that in the past. Your songs tend to be more structured, and think there's like maybe one song or two songs in this whole album that's like that. But the
Okay.
majority of them are really unstructured. The first 30 seconds sounds like an intro to a song, and then you think you're on a new track, but it's still the same track. So
Mhm.
would you say that was an intentional thing that occurred, or was that environmental? Was that in response to the circumstances around you?
Yeah. And I feel like it's kinda hard to say which one it is. Definitely in response to the environment in a lot of ways because I didn't have a lot of time to be working on the music, so a lot of times I'd have this thing I wanted to say, and I'd sit down, and I think the only, physical instrument I had with me was my acoustic guitar, and I would strum a little bit, and I'd have an idea, but with other albums, I'd have a lot more of an expanse of, I'm gonna sit with
Mhm,
this song and I'm gonna keep building it and sitting with the guitar for maybe 45 minutes. Where this was like I'd wake up and I had a really good idea and I had 20 minutes before I have to go to work. And here's the idea, and it feels like there's something really magical there.
mhm,
And I collected all of these, but then none of them seemed to want to go somewhere clearly. Like none of them. Sometimes I feel like my songs reach a certain point, and I can kind of tell what they want me to do out of them,
mhm,
and I'll start to kind of hear what makes sense where they go. And none of these pieces really gave me that, and
mhm,
I just ended up accumulating all these different pieces of music, and then kind of like a sound collage. I just began slowly piecing them together, or like a mosaic or
mhm,
something, and
mhm,
seeing what helped to tell the kind of story in a cohesive way, even though it was. I think that because it was all recorded in the same amount of time, that's what made it cohesive. But yeah, it's really even instrumentally, it's kind of all over the place.
mhm.
But I just tried to carry like a thin thread through all of it.
Well, it's all over the place, but it's really gracefully all over the place. Like, it doesn't feel chaotic. It
Right.
feels like we joked about this before, but it truly feels dissociative. Like,
Mhm.
not in like a horrible way, but in a really magical way. Like the magic of dissociation is how you leave your body for this other realm. And then you come back to your body, like, oh, what's here? I didn't realize what happened until I came back, and you're kind of catching up to the information. And that's how I
Mhm.
experience a lot of these songs is they that's why I said it feels like wake and sleep, like those strange states of consciousness where I kind of come up for air from sleep and I'm here, and then I'm kind of dragged back to another realm or idea, and then I'm back here. Uh, and I guess I'm saying that because I wonder when you listen to it, what does it do for your body? I find that songs, at least the way I write them, it's like when you said parts work, like actual parts are trying to communicate to us through songs, right? So it's like a very shamanic, animistic experience. So when you listen to this particular album compared to your past albums, what does it do for your body? What parts of you does it awaken?
Yeah, it's just so different from everything else, and I feel like um, I mean, it's probably going to inform the direction that I go in, but
Mhm,
in a lot of ways, it was when I was writing it, I was in a more difficult place, I
mhm,
think, than I had been in a while, especially like emotionally. And um, yeah, I think that that kind of played a big part in it. And I kind of had all these pieces, and then a lot of things changed over the course of a year. And I then spent the past probably about 6 months kind of assembling all of it and doing the final mixing. And a lot of ways, that was the final composition too. I mean, I added some of the final pieces, honestly, probably just a few weeks ago, into songs that
mhm,
ended up making them an extra minute or so longer.
mhm,
Um, so in that way, it was really, I'd say it was kind of a healing experience where I'd had these songs that came out of difficult places, and I was able to kind of sit with them and put them together and kind of polish them. And um, it feels really good to listen to because it feels like a really complete thought, and I'm really happy that it came out that way because of the way that it has all
mhm,
these disparate parts. Um, yeah, and there's an interesting it is very dreamlike, and yeah, I totally agree. That kind of has that dissociative quality where sometimes it feels really raw and it feels like I'm in the room with you, and then other times you're shot off to who even knows where. um,
Well, on that note, I want to play Again, which is my favorite song from
mm.
the album. So let's hear that one.
come back to hear this bird sing its song again. Not sure what you've come here expecting. Trying to figure out the simplest solution, but I don't even have the time. Tried to figure out the best way to live. I wanted to share it with you, but all I've found is wind blowing through the tall grass, and all you found is my voice. So you've come back to hear this bird sing its song again. So you've come back again. So you've come back to hear this bird sing its song again. So you've come back again. So you've come back to hear this bird sing its song again. So you've come back again. So you've come back.
What I find so liberating about what you're saying, like I feel it in my body, the liberation is not having to, like you said, the whole album sounds like a complete thought, but each thought isn't needing to be completed.
Mm,
You know, it's like there can be such there can be such a pressure when you're writing songs to have it resolve a certain way, or to be a certain length, or to go back to a certain verse or a chorus, or go more minor, like all these ideas you're trying to get a point across. I think what I like the most about this album is I don't feel like you're striving to get a point across. It just feels like an honest expression that came through you without a ton of obsession. And you tend to obsess, like you're really detail focused, right?
mm,
So you could spend years on one song. Our dear friend Fredo, who's also editing this for YouTube, has spent years on one song. I've heard his songs like over like the course of 5 years change shapes. I don't have that kind of attention, but you two do. And I wonder, like, how was it for you to relinquish the control of making something really specific versus just letting it come in as it wanted to?
mm. Yeah, I mean, I feel like it was very, very transformative because a lot of this whole process too, I really released the idea of what I thought an album was gonna be or do for whatever, like, music trajectory career that Heavybird might have, and it was more so I felt like I really wanted to say this thing over it having to fit into some kind of mold, and I realized that this is, um, like, if I were to, like, imaginarily rate how commercially successful each album could be, this is all the way at the bottom. Like, it's not yeah, it's really a deep dive. It's like
Mhm.
I feel like Again could almost be on the radio somewhere, but I don't think any other track really could, and they're all so contextual, it's kind of hard to pull any singular track out.
It could make
So
it to like a college radio in the mid '90s. Like all the college radios in the mid '90s would play this album.
yeah, but I mean, they played so many different things at that point. Um, yeah, gosh. Um, but yeah, I don't know, I feel like, just a lot of releasing expectation of what I thought it was gonna be, and then also what I think an album should be.
Mhm.
Because I mean, I finished it and then I realized it was slightly under half an hour long, which really surprised me because I usually try to keep them around, 40, 45 minutes.
Yeah, yeah.
But it didn't feel like it needed anything else, and I didn't want to push it. Um, and yeah, there was a certain point where like there was definitely a lot of I spent more time, I think, working on the transitions than ever before, and probably less times reworking like maybe like the hook or something. So rather than putting all my focus on what's the biggest, most sensational part, I put all my focus on like how are these two pieces relating,
Mm,
and really getting into the nuance of like how do you make just a flow happen.
mhm, mhm. How has music for you been a way to navigate trauma? Like, how did you even discover that you could play music? What's that whole experience like?
Yeah. Um, I think especially when it comes to when I started, it was more of a way to have like a positive source of connection with other people. My parents both really love music. My mom used to take me to concerts
Mm,
all the time. My dad always had music on in the car when we drive places. So there was that kind of the commonality. And then I wanted to be involved in that. So I'm like, oh, music seemed like an obvious first step. And then, um, yeah, growing up neurodivergent, but not being diagnosed, I was always kind of in this other area, and
mhm,
music was a really great way to have some sort of bridge to connect with people,
mhm.
um, especially in a way that's nonverbal, which is very sasatisfying. Um,
Yeah, so
and
those of you who have heard of nonviolent communication, evidence to nonverbal communication.
yes, I prefer nonverbal. But I definitely I wasn't always writing songs, and then when I started writing songs, probably in my early 20s is when I really started to notice that um, I could say something that I had inside me in a way that other people would listen to, and then they might even feel that same way too.
Mm,
Because a lot of what
mhm,
I wanted to do was, I'd listen to music and the lyrics would say something that really meant something really deeply to me. And I felt very seen by that. And I always had this wish that, I want to put something out in the world that other people can hear that and feel seen too. And working through some really difficult things in my life, like I think the first time I really became conscious of how much working with music could help working through trauma was I had a friend suddenly pass away, and he was living in a different state. And at that point, he had been going through, I think, probably like a long, drawn out period of psychosis, and he was having a really hard time. He didn't have the biggest safety net, and um, when I found out he passed away, I reached out to other mutual friends, but no one really had the reaction I did. And I just felt like so much inside me. There were so many different
mm,
emotions, and so much sensation kept coming up that I couldn't sleep for a week.
mhm,
And I tried all these different ways to, and this is long before I knew about somatics, but I was trying all these different ways to try to get that huge sensation that kept coming up to move through me.
mhm,
And finally, I sat down with a notebook and I wrote stream of consciousness, like 7 pages. And then I took big portions out of that and I wrote the song Schizophrenia, which is on, I think, 2 albums ago of mine now. And there was something when I finished the song, I felt like something finally passed through and moved out into the world. And then it
mm.
felt like this beautiful thing to offer out to anyone else who might hear it. And a kind of like a beautiful way to kind of memorialize my friend, as well as even that sensation, and to talk
Mhm.
about that kind of experience, which I feel like I hadn't really specifically heard
Well, that
before.
experience you just described is how what I love music, what I love about it, and really art, but I, I like music more than art. I'm gonna just say it on the record.
Yeah.
I love how tactile it is, like in my
Mhm.
body, and I like how like it feels passive. Like I don't have
Mm.
to stare at the painting. I don't have to read the book. I can just like lay back and be washed in the sound. It's like really being with a being in a different way. But what I love about it is that it's born from our bodies, from these experiences, and then in its own kind of generous, benevolent nature, it goes out into the world, and then people connect to it. It's like these little lighthouses that attract you based on like similar experiences, like you said, or even a felt sense if you don't even know what it's about. Like
Mhm.
I often feel a song before I even really take in its lyrics, right? And so
Totally.
I think it's what I love about I think that's why music changed or informed and informs how I hold trauma healing work, where
Mhm.
it's all about transmutation. It's not about right or wrong. It's not about like pain or bliss. It's about, oh, it's waiting to transform into something new. And when you said that that writing the song gave you this way to move this out into the world and it kind of left you, it transformed into a song. Like it took on a whole new shape. It wasn't stuck in your bones anymore. And I guess I wonder now that you're training in somatics and you do all this work with us, how is your relationship to music shifting? I would also say as a sound healer now, like
Mhm.
what is that like to sound heal rather than perform on stages, songs and as a drummer and a guitarist? Like what's the difference?
Oh, totally. It's really, really interesting to see the two side by side from my perspective because, um, like the music I write with Heavybird, it doesn't. I like it because it holds the two places at once. I always try to bring in. There's like rock elements, so maybe the drums are heavy, and maybe there's some distorted guitar, or something's a little bit noisy. And then at the same time, I bring in, soft keyboards or really beautiful sound of an orchestra. And I love the holding of the two, which is something that I feel like, at least in the theory, it's like so reaffirmed by somatics that, we can have both these things and it creates something
Mm,
even more beautiful and deep and astounding when you can hold both pleasant and unpleasant at the same time.
mhm,
And I think because that's kind of the way I write music for Heavybird, I have a hard time bringing it live because I think a lot of times with live shows, it's all about building up activation. So you go
mm,
out and there's live
mhm,
music and everyone's talking very loud and very fast. Um, and there's alcohol and all these different things where you're so much is going on with the nervous system. And it's even overwhelming to me to just be on stage and be in that experience.
mhm.
Everyone's standing, maybe they're yelling and clapping. There's just so much activation. Whereas with sound, when I'm offering a sound healing, there couldn't
Mm,
be anything more opposite. Everyone's
mhm,
lying down. Everyone is focused inward rather than outward. Um, and it's just
mm.
such a beautiful way to be with people. Um, and then I just personally find so deeply meaningful that at the end of a show, like I'd play a show with Heavybird, and someone would come up to me and be like, "Oh, I loved it," and it doesn't really sink in as deeply as when I offer a sound healing and someone comes up afterwards and says, thank you, that was really moving to
Mm,
me,"
mhm.
which I think is the thing that I always kind of crave to get from Heavybird too, which I know we've talked about before, how you kind of when your music isn't like mainstream and the music itself is different and the response that as artists were or as musicians we're looking for is also kind of different than
Mhm.
the typical like either rock or pop performance where just the response is different from the audience and from people. And no matter what way I'm interacting with music, I'm hoping that both for myself and for other people that there's just yeah, like a deep introspective um experience where you either find something new about yourself or feel seen and acknowledged and accepted in some way that you hadn't before.
When you're saying that, I was being transported back to 2016 when I performed at the Gray Eagle with Rasputina in Asheville, North Carolina. And it was so activating. I left my body. Like as I was playing the piano, I had this extremely psychedelic experience. Those of you listening, I've never taken psychedelics, but I had this extremely psychedelic experience on this piano where I couldn't like the keys were kind of shifting their shape and the
Mhm.
sounds were bending in my ear and I felt like out of body and I had to really breathe myself back in because of that level of activation. I had 2 electric cellos on both sides of me coming through my wedge, and I had this crowd that was screaming and the lights were flickering, and it was so activating.
Mm.
And I think of recently, I was with you and I'm in front of 700 people, and it was so pleasant. It was like so like calm. I mean,
Yeah.
I think we had like 300 people at the Rasputina show. But I like how you said that difference because I'm imagining you in your setup when you're doing the sound healing, everyone's laying down and you're kind of just in a way you're also being blessed by these instruments and
Mm.
these vibrations.
Totally.
And
Totally.
I like how you said they're going inward. It's not this externalized expression onto you, like staring at the stage, like attuning to you. They're attuning to themselves. And I've learned that it's been much easier for me to become public as a trauma teacher than it has been as a musician because I don't like to be attuned to. I don't want people looking at me for the answer to themselves. I want them to look inwards. So I guess I'm saying all that just to say the nonverbal language of sound. It's one way that really more than initiates, like leads you into parts of your body. And so what I want to kind of move just a little bit into your sound healing, then we'll pendulate back to Heavybird. When you're doing the sound healing work, like how do you notice, especially with your somatic experiences now, how do you notice that transforming bodies? Like why does it work is what I should say.
Mm. Gosh.
And you
I
can
mean,
be abstract in your answer.
no, no, it's such a good question, and I also I like talking about both too because both Heavybird and the sound healings that I offer because um, the experience for me is so different too. Where like when I'm working on Heavybird stuff, it's so compositional and it's kind of heady, and I'm thinking
Mm,
about a clear kind of story or narrative I'm trying to get across. Whereas when I'm offering a sound healing, I kind of set myself up beforehand,
mm,
and then I just come in and I give myself structure and timing so that I don't um completely disappear into the ether. And then I just kind of let everything kind of flow through me as to I'm as much in it as I think I almost feel like as the people who are listening are.
mm,
Where
mhm,
I'll maybe hit a singing bowl and I'll be hearing it too, and that'll hearing it in that moment will affect what I do next, which is just a very different way to relate to sound and music, I think, than I had previously done before.
mhm,
Um, yeah, so it's such a different way to really. It's so much more of it is by feel. So I kind of track how I'm feeling with what's being created in front of me, and occasionally I will kind of attune to what's going on, especially if there's people physically with me, to what's happening in the space, and that might inform what I decide to do, whether I stay with what I'm doing or shift into a new direction. But a lot of times it's very intuitive, and I just kind of feel just like an urge to do something. And I really offering a sound healing really forces me to completely release ego.
mm,
Whereas sometimes, like if it's like art, which is like heavy bird, and I'm kind of crafting it, and it doesn't
mhm,
can't always completely release it there.
mhm, mhm.
But offering a sound healing really just kind of I get very, very dropped in, and it's just about what's in the moment, and then when it's gone, it's gone.
So what's your favorite song off the new album? Well,
Mm.
tell us about it and then we'll play it.
Oh gosh. Um,
It can't be one I already played.
that's I also really love Again. It has a very special place for me. Um, I would say probably Back to Sleep, which is the
Mm.
3rd track, which, although also The Fear, I really love that song too. But I'm gonna
Pick
talk about
one
I have to
only.
pick I'm gonna go with Back to Sleep
Okay.
because because I like I had the idea of what I wanted to say, um, and there's very few words in that song, and I feel like by deciding to use different samples, especially I go from singing the song and it's kind of a little bit more of a pop structure, and then I introduce the sound of a protest as the kind of
Mm,
juxtaposition sonically, but it
mhm,
continues to tell the story of what's happening. And then it shifts from there into this orchestral piece that I use a lot of different kind of small key change shifts to push and pull the emotions. So you're kind of not sure if it's, a happy or sad, or like it kind of blends all of those things as much as I can.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, I feel really good about the way that those three parts really came together into one piece.
So let's play Back to Sleep and we'll listen to it together.
We woke up to a broken world, so we went back to sleep. We woke up to a broken world, so we went back to sleep. We woke up to a broken world, so we went back to sleep. I don't know what it's all come to.
So I just wanted to transition at the close soon. Tell us about like people listening to this for the first time. They don't most people listening to this don't know this part of your life or your work. They
Um,
know what you do here, they know what you do outside of here with Emerald Light Sound Healing. How first of all, how can they find Heavy Bird? And you're doing a listening party, right?
I am doing listening
Okay,
party,
tell us
yes.
everything. Tell us the whole story.
Very excited about it. So I will be having a listening party on the 28th at 6 p.m. EST, which I believe will be tomorrow when this airs. And that is going to be over on my Bandcamp page, which is heavybird.bandcamp.com. And
Mm,
there will be a link there that you can join me, and I'm going to be there live. There's a little chat box, and you can kind of type in there, and we can have a conversation while everyone listens together. So it's a lot of fun, and especially for this album, it feels a really fitting way to release it, because
mm,
it's kind of the way the whole album feels. There's a kind of like an intimacy, yet at the same time, there's all this kind of like effects and processing that creates a kind of space and surrealness that kind of layers over it.
mhm.
Um, yeah, and I'm on Instagram too, which I don't even remember my handle offhand. Uh, this is
That's how much you
probably
use it.
partially why no one knows me. I think it's wait, let me see on my computer. It's just Heavy Bird Music.
And we'll put all that in the show notes.
Yeah, perfect.
So if there's anything you hmm, actually let me feel this for a minute. Yeah. What do you want people to know about you and Heavy Bird? Like people listening that never heard anything besides today, like what should they know? What are you interested in expressing? What and anything you like to close this on around an expression from this creature of Heavy Bird you've created.
Mm, mm. Yeah. I feel like with Heavybird, my goal is to always strike a balance between expressing my humanity and the story that I carry, and also try to mirror the story that's going on in the larger context of this country and in the world,
Mm,
in the hopes that there's like a thread of, yeah, just like the human kind of storytelling. And a lot of what I focus on is like the juxtaposition. So, you know, sometimes I'll use more like noise or harsher sounds against really beautiful sounds. And I try to like to do the same thing lyrically. Um, yeah, and expressing like trying to express the emotional depths of how I feel, how it feels to be human, and how it feels to be human today within this society and larger society. Um, and then even like spiritual and emotional aspects as well.
mm. Thank you, love. It was nice to have you on today and
Yeah, thank
share
you.
your music with people. And maybe what we'll do, even though you're all listening to this, Evan already said by the time this comes out tomorrow will be the listening party, but we'll actually try to bump this out a little earlier than that. So depending on when this comes out, just look at the calendar, and the 28th of September is when this listening party is. So you can click on the link in the show details and be part of that. That's the end of today's episode. Now let's take a moment to notice where we feel the episode in our bodies. Close your eyes. Take a breath. And let whatever wants to come up, come up. And remember, those sensations hold the wisdom that we're looking for. If you want to go deeper, visit holisticlifenavigation.com.